The Baker and the Blogger by Zoe Blessing. Chapter 1. Serenity. Serenity squeezed the mouse until her fingers turned white. She didn't think she'd have to hear Tabitha's name ever again. Yet here it was. A glowing review on French Elegance Cafe. She snorted. French my ass. She knew for a fact that Tabby was from Milwaukee, and the only French thing about her were her kisses. She shook her head, halting the direction of her thoughts. Fuck Tabitha. Wait, poor word choice. Serenity squeezed her eyes shut and willed something to replace the steamy images of those hot nights. Anything would do. Puppies. Puppies are cute. She opened her eyes and read the review again. Damn Tabitha and her recipe-stealing success. The only edge Tabitha's bakery had over hers was location. Tabby always was business smart. After they broke up, she'd secured an investor and found a busy intersection in a trendy neighborhood. And Serenity was still stuck here, way off the beaten track, struggling to keep Serenity Bakery afloat. Her jaw ached from clenching so hard, so she rubbed it. Looking up from her computer, she surveyed the empty tables of her small shop. The rows of fresh pastries sat behind glass, beautiful and untouched like Sleeping Beauty. The lease renewal languished on the counter next to her, waiting for her signature. She barely broke even these days. Maybe she should give up and get a regular job, like regular people. Right, sure, work for some schmuck who would pay her less than she was worth and take credit for her brilliance. The thought made her stomach sour, and she glared at the computer screen again. She'd been following Jillian's bites for years. Her restaurant reviews were always funny, engaging, and spot on. She'd discovered a few new favorites thanks to this food blogger. But today, Serenity shook her head. Today felt like a betrayal. This Jillian person obviously did not know the truth, so it was up to Serenity to set the facts straight. She flexed her fingers and began typing, her keystrokes growing noisier until she was nearly punching the keys with angry strokes. When she finished, she reread everything and hit the submit button. When she saw her comment appear under the review, she leaned back, allowing a smile to emerge. It wouldn't fix anything, but the rant made her feel better.
Chapter 2. Jillian. The buzz on her phone notified Jillian of new email, and she looked at it. New blog comment, the subject line said. She felt that familiar thrill zipped through her. She loved it when people left comments on her blog posts. Most of them told her how right she was and thanked her for introducing them to yet another hidden gem. Was it strange to get warm fuzzies from complete strangers? I'd like a mochaccino, please, with soy. Jillian stuffed her phone into her back pocket. Coming right up. The email would have to wait. During her lunch break, as she gnawed on an egg sandwich, she opened up the message and read the blog comment included within. She smiled at first, but as she read on, the food in her mouth turned to sawdust, and she had to wash it down with a swig of water. Then she read it again. I have been a faithful follower of this blog for years. Your insights are accurate and even hilarious sometimes. But I must take issue with this review. It is founded on lies and betrayal. Success should be founded on integrity, not cutthroat business practices. Any mentally deficient dolt should recognize that. I'm the owner of Serenity Bakery, and I know for a fact that her most popular pastries were stolen from my recipe book. Mine! Baking is my life and my livelihood, and to have it stolen away boils my blood. To see French Elegance Cafe prosper, that name always makes me gag, while my own shop languishes is hard to take, to say the least. But to see its virtues extolled here on a blog that I once loved so dearly, well, disappointment doesn't even begin to cover it. I won't be following Jillian's bites anymore. Serenity. Jillian sat back, stunned. So much for warm fuzzies. She blinked against the sting behind her eyes, annoyed at her reaction. Who cares what one random idiot says? But even as she finished out her shift, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Recipe stealing was a big deal, but certainly not illegal. And who's to say this person wasn't lying? She, assuming Serenity was even her name, could be a disgruntled employee, or a psycho. By the time Jillian got home, her fingers itched to type up a rebuttal. Her honor was at stake after all. She prided herself on honest reviews, and to be accused of supporting lies was an attack on her reputation. And, considering the sad state of her career, or lack thereof, her online reputation was all she had. She shoved the dirty laundry off her desk chair and plunked into it, turning on her computer. She had a thing or two to say to Miss Serenity, the not-so-serene baker. Alleged baker, she corrected. But when she opened a browser, she found herself Googling Serenity Bakery instead. Her eyebrows shot up when she discovered it was only a block away from Cupa Jose, the coffee shop where Jillian worked. Funny, she'd never seen it before. Then again, according to the map, it was tucked away on a back street, off the main road. She found herself clicking around the sad little website, which was obviously thrown together by an inexperienced do-it-yourselfer. If the shop was as sad as this website, it was no wonder it was suffering. Feeling vindicated, Jillian sat up straighter and closed her browser. She would not respond to the scathing comment. Not tonight, anyway. She would do her due diligence and check out this Serenity Bakery herself.
Chapter 3, Serenity. If Serenity had known having a hissy fit in the comments section of Jillian's bites would have boosted her business, she would have done it ages ago. Not that it was hopping, but the trickle of patrons was a definite improvement over the crickets of previous days. The bell at the front door chimed, and a cute woman walked in, her blonde ponytail bobbing, as she took in the rustic wooden chairs and wrought iron decor. Serenity caught herself. No ogling the customers. "Hi," she said, plastering on her best smile. "First time here?" The woman jumped a bit. Yes, actually, I had no idea this was here." Serenity's smile wavered. "You're the fifth person to say that. I'd pick up and move if I could afford a lease on the main road. That giant tree covering your sign doesn't help either." The cute woman glanced behind her at the majestic tree just outside the door. Serenity sighed. "Yeah, well, I can't bring myself to ask the city to cut it down. It's been there longer than I've been alive. It just seems wrong." The woman gave her a peculiar look, her head tilting slightly. Serenity's brows drew together. What's that look?" She shook her head. "Nothing. I was just thinking you could use sandwich boards outside to help people find you." Serenity narrowed her eyes. "Sandwiches?" The woman smiled and came closer. "Sandwich boards. They're double-sided signs you set on the sidewalk. You could have one outside your door and another one on the corner of the main road." "Oh," Serenity stared at her, telling herself she was caught up by this woman's idea and not her amazingly blue eyes. She blinked herself back to reality and grabbed a nearby pen. "I need to write this down." She was scribbling on a notepad when the jangling bell made her look up again. Annoyance tightened her jaw when she saw who it was. "For fuck's sake, Truman, can't you call like a normal person? I have till the end of the month to decide." The small man nervously adjusted his glasses and kept his distance by the door. "It's just, I have a business very eager for this space, and they're hoping for an answer soon." Her heart sunk and she felt her shoulders sag a bit. "Let me guess, they're willing to pay double what I pay." "Not exactly, but they are willing to renovate this space on their own dime." Serenity frowned and looked around. "What's wrong with it now?" "Nah, nothing." Truman adjusted his glasses again. "But they plan on updated fixtures and one of those trendy rolling garage doors in the front." She pinched the bridge of her nose and sighed. "Get the fuck out, Truman. And I'll let you know if I decide to hang on to this apparent dump." Truman coughed and hurried out without another word.
Chapter 4. Jillian. The woman behind the counter had terrible manners. Jillian mentally deducted points for cursing in front of a customer, but something about her intrigued Jillian. Her sentimentality over a tree, for example. She didn't expect it from someone who called her mentally deficient. Assuming this person was the owner. It was time to find out. "So, you're the owner?" Jillian asked once Truman had made his exit. The woman sighed again and pushed a hand through her unruly mop of brown curls. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's worth the headache to continue. She lifted her tired brown eyes and examined Jillian. Let me guess, you saw my brilliant comment on Jillian's bites and had to come see what kind of raving lunatic I was, right? Her head dropped as she shook it. I'm such a fuck-up. What am I doing trying to run a business? Something about her sad expression made Jillian want to hug her. She resisted the impulse, and also resisted the urge to blurt that she was the one who wrote the review about her nemesis. It just wasn't time yet. As soon as this owner found out, Jillian was sure she would have her ass handed to her and promptly kicked out of the shop. But before that happened, Jillian wanted to learn more about this curious baker. About your website, she began, hoping to distract the baker from her morose thoughts. The woman looked up. Ed? Jillian paused, trying to find a tactful way to say it looked like a 12-year-old made it. Could use a little updating. Might help with your image. The baker nodded. I know, but I can't afford a web designer. You don't need one. Come again? There are templates you can set up yourself. It's pretty easy. Her eyes widened. Easy is good. What was your name again? June? Jillian sputtered, mentally kicking herself for almost giving herself away. June, I'm Serenity. She held out her hand. When Jillian took it, her grip was firm and warm. And before you ask, yes, that's my real name. My mother was a hippie named Celeste, and unfortunately, free love doesn't help you run a business. What it does do is make you sappy around trees and in trouble with your mother for cursing all the time. Jillian laughed and found herself liking Serenity. She had to sternly remind herself why she was here. The woman had accused her of deficient mental capacity, after all. She couldn't possibly be the decent human being she seemed to be.
Chapter 5. Serenity. She liked June's laugh. It made her feel lighter in a way she hadn't in a long time. And those eyes, like clear swimming pools that she wanted to dive into. Serenity dug the pen cap into her finger until the pain cleared her addled brain. No fantasizing about customers, you numb nut. Then she realized June was staring at her, apparently waiting for a response. Serenity cleared her throat. What? I asked, which one of these are your favorite? June gestured to the glass case full of pastries. Oh, she set the pen down. People usually asked what she recommended, but they never asked what her favorite was. Well, the eclairs over there are the most popular, but my personal favorite is the cugnammon. June's forehead wrinkled. The queen what? Serenity smiled and extracted one from the case. My mother taught me how to make it. Those blue eyes widened at the flaky folded pastry before her. This looks just like the... She stopped herself and snapped her eyes to Serenity's before looking away. Never mind. Looks just like the what? June rubbed her nose and looked at the pastry again. They call it a Queen Anne at the French Elegance Cafe. Serenity stiffened as her lips twisted. Of course they do. Fuck tradition, right? She noticed June shuffle uncomfortably and softened her stance. Sorry, I get riled up. June lifted a shoulder. It's okay. Seems like you have good reason to be. Well, yeah, I mean, not only does that bitch dump me and steal my recipe, she names the damn thing. A French creation, mind you, after a British queen. Seriously, that's just demented. June snickered but didn't comment further. Serenity wondered at the thoughts that passed behind those expressive blue eyes when her smile faded. I shouldn't be talking your ear off. Serenity assembled a takeout box and placed the pastry inside it. You came in here for a reason. I'll give you this one. What else can I get you? The warmth of June's smile dissipated some of Serenity's agitation. I'll take one of everything. Her eyebrows shot up. Everything? June cocked her head to one side. Is that a problem? Hell no! Serenity chastised herself for acting like an awestruck dolt. One of everything. Coming right up. It was a bit unnerving, June watching her with those cerulean eyes of hers while Serenity removed pastry after pastry with her tongs. Get hold of yourself. And maybe get laid while you're at it, because bakers should not be getting so hot and bothered by their customers.
Chapter 6. Jillian. Jillian couldn't stop watching those practiced hands as they stacked pastries into the large box. She began imagining those deft fingers sliding along her body. She blinked and shook the inappropriate thoughts out of her head. Her dry spell was doing strange things to her. Serenity was research, nothing more. When the baker closed the box, she proceeded to tie a string around its sides. There you go, one box of everything with a handy-dandy, handle. Jillian grinned. You certainly are handy. The words were out of her mouth before she realized the suggestive tone she'd used, and she blushed. Serenity raised an eyebrow and gave her a lopsided smile, making Jillian's stomach flutter. I should get going. Jillian took the box, paid cash, and hurried to the exit. Before leaving, she said over her shoulder, I'm glad I met you. Me too, the woman replied, her dark eyes beckoning Jillian to come back. Their gazes locked for a breathless moment, then Jillian tore hers away and forced herself to open the door. When she finally got home, she found herself still thinking about a certain baker with dark bedroom eyes and curls she longed to touch. She nearly slapped herself for being so ridiculous. She'd just met the woman. Still, there was something about her. Jillian wasn't sure what to make of her when she first entered, but Serenity's honest and direct manner was refreshing, made her want to keep talking to her. And when she mentioned the ex-girlfriend, something primal and selfish seemed to click within her. Like this woman could be Jillian's. She scoffed at herself. No doubt as soon as Serenity discovered who she really was, she'd want nothing to do with her. She fingered the brown string on the pink pastry box, tied so thoughtfully that Jillian imagined she'd done it just for her. Which was silly. Jillian was a customer just like any other. The baker had probably already forgotten about her. With a sigh, she pulled the string off and opened the box. The scents that emanated from within made her mouth water. She had no idea how Serenity could work in a bakery and not be 300 pounds. Far from it. The woman looked fit enough to run a marathon. Jillian shook her head. Stop it. Just eat a damn pastry and forget about Serenity. If only it was that easy.
Chapter 7. Serenity. An entire week, and Serenity was still no closer to deciding on the lease. She blamed June and those amazingly blue eyes. She'd been able to think of little else. No, it wasn't just the eyes. It was her gentle manner and her angelic laugh and the way she seemed, well, interested in her. It had been a hell of a long time since Serenity had felt interesting to anyone. But she was gone now. June had taken her box of pastries and disappeared. Every time the shop door opened, Serenity would stop everything to see if it was June, but it never was. With a sigh, she settled in front of the shop computer and checked her email. Among the messages was a notification of a new review on Jillian's Bites. Serenity pressed her lips together. She never did remove herself from their mailings. She opened the message to locate the unsubscribed link when the headline inside made her freeze. Serenity Bakery for happy tummies and inner peace. What was this? How could a review have been written about her bakery without her knowing about it? A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. Sure, the headline seemed cheery and positive, but there was no doubt in Serenity's mind that this was sarcastic retaliation against her inflammatory comment. She'd been so stupid, writing all that out of anger. Why couldn't this Jillian person just delete it, like any normal person would? No, why would she, when she had the power of persuasion among all her followers? Why delete a comment like a coward when she could simply tank a business with an unkind review? It would be so easy. Serenity rubbed her eyes. Maybe her decision to renew the lease would be made for her. She considered deleting the message, but there was no way she'd be able to forget about it. As much as she despised the review for French Elegance Café, she still had a grudging admiration for Jillian the writer. She clicked through to the review and began reading. Serenity Bakery for happy tummies and inner peace. As you may or may not be aware, my review of French Elegance Café came under fire recently with claims of ill-gotten recipes and stolen business. While I was unable to substantiate these claims, I did get a good feel for Serenity Bakery itself. I found its owner, whose name actually is Serenity, to be of a thoughtful and generous spirit, not the gibbering lunatic I expected to find it all. What she may lack in tact, she more than makes up for in kindness, candor, and passion for her work. Serenity stopped reading and scrunched her eyebrows. She couldn't decide whether to be offended at being called tactless or honored that Jillian thought her kind. Wait, when exactly did she talk to this reviewer anyway? She didn't recall talking to anyone named Jillian, unless the reviewer sent someone else to do her dirty work. Serenity racked her brain, trying to recall all the customers she'd talked to. Had it been last month, it would have been easy to pick someone out among the few visitors. But this week had been busier than usual. Maybe it was that guy the other day who spent 2 hours nibbling on nearly everything she had while typing on his laptop. It made sense, even though the only time he spoke to her was to place orders. He could have sat back and watched her interact with people. The thought of someone watching her like that creeped her out a little. She resumed reading the review. Now let's talk about the actual food. I can gab until I'm blue in the face about a person's character, but if their food isn't up to par, I simply can't recommend it. So, do I recommend Serenity Bakery? In a word, yes. 1,000 times, yes. Never have I eaten anything so tender, flaky, and just plain delicious. I'm proud to say I sampled every item this cute little shop has to offer, and I loved every single one of them. Absolutely loved them. I want to marry these pastries and have their buttery little children. If you don't value your waistline and want an out-of-body experience in the form of baked goods, then run to Serenity Bakery. Run, I tell you. You won't regret it.
Chapter 8. Jillian. Jillian wanted to go back to Serenity Bakery, like really badly. She wanted another one of those queen something pastries, or 10. She'd been in the thralls of taste bud ecstasy when she wrote that review. But who was she kidding? She just wanted to see Serenity and her handy hands again. She smiled at the memory of watching those hands packing pastries and tying the string. Jillian had been there for, all of 20 minutes? And she was this smitten? It made no sense. None at all. Her phone buzzed, and Jillian stopped wiping the outside window of the coffee shop. Her chest tightened, and she held her breath as she checked her phone, only to let it out again when it turned out to be a credit card bill notification. She shook her head. She got this way every time with new emails now. Ever since posting that review, she kept hoping for, and at the same time dreading, a comment from Serenity herself. But 3 days later, still not a peep from her. What had Jillian been expecting anyway? She'd met the woman under false pretenses, and even though she'd written a rave review, Serenity might not appreciate being deceived. Maybe she chose not to respond because she thought they were even now. What would Serenity do if Jillian came back to the bakery? Would she recognize Jillian as the reviewer? How many people could have possibly sampled every single pastry in the shop this week? Jillian had debated over dropping that huge clue into the review, torn as to whether or not she wanted to visit the bakery again as June. In the end, she'd stayed true to herself and her review. After all, it was about the food, not her personal feelings. Jillian gave the Capa Jose logo on the window one last wipe and headed back inside. Maybe one day she would get the guts to face Serenity again. Just not today.
Chapter 9. Serenity. She recognized that bobbing blonde ponytail. Could the woman with the enchanting eyes really work only a block away from her shop? June, she called from down the sidewalk, her breath misting in front of her in the chill morning air. The woman didn't hear her and disappeared inside. Serenity stopped in front of the window and peered in. She must have passed Capa Jose 100 times without ever going inside. Why would she, when she owned a bakery with its own coffee? She spotted June behind the counter, restocking napkins. Without hesitation, Serenity went inside to talk to her. She had just reached the counter when June turned away without looking up. "May I help you?" The droll voice of the young man at the register pulled her attention away. No, I just need to talk to June." "Who?" "Her." Serenity pointed at June, who was now fiddling with an espresso machine. Fine, whatever. The young man ambled to the espresso machine and poked June's shoulder. Yo, I'm going on break since it's slow. Take over the register for me? An exasperated sigh. There are things you could clean during the lulls. Yeah, but why do I need to when you're so efficient? A charming grin split his face. Fine, go. You're the best. I know. Mind telling the regional manager that? The young man trotted off without answering. When June finally glanced up and saw Serenity, her smile froze and her eyes grew huge. What are you doing here? Finally seeing those impossibly blue eyes again made Serenity's heart thump faster. The look of sheer terror on the woman's face confused her, though. I was walking by and I happened to see you, wanted to come in and say hi. Oh, June swallowed noisily. Hi. Serenity was about to ask her why she was acting so nervous when her eyes slid to the name tag pinned to June's apron string. Her stomach dropped as the puzzle clicked into place. No, it couldn't be. Your name is Jillian? The woman's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I can explain. Serenity crossed her arms and waited, too stunned to react to this revelation. It all made sense now. Sort of. The reviewer was indeed Jillian herself, and Jillian was June. Or rather, June was Jillian. Something like that. Serenity frowned at her jumbled thoughts. Well, Jillian, not June, shifted to her other foot and began wringing her hands. I wanted to... You were so... I didn't... A group of giggling teenage girls entered and Jillian looked over Serenity's shoulder at them. Shit, she said under her breath and turned pleading eyes to Serenity. Can we continue this later, please? Serenity pressed her lips into a thin line. She was too angry to understand why Jillian had lied to her in the shop, and also too elated at having found her again. It was so confusing. So she turned on her heel and left without another word.
Chapter 10. Jillian. Shit. Jillian wanted so badly to throw her apron aside and run after Serenity. That look on her face, it was hard to read, but she was pretty sure she saw betrayal there. Hello, one of the girls waved a hand in front of her face. Did you hear me? Jillian blinked rapidly and focused on the girl. Sorry, I'm a space cadet today. Could you repeat that? The girl repeated her order and Jillian fell back into work mode. Which was a good thing, because speculating on Serenity's state of mind was an exercise in futility while she was stuck behind this counter. When her lunch break finally came, she bolted for the bakery, heart racing long before she even stepped outside. She began rehearsing the things she could say, different ways to apologize, to explain everything. She had to make Serenity understand. She wasn't quite sure why, but she had to. When she got to the bakery, she gaped at the small crowd of people inside. The last time she'd been here, the only thing crowded about the shop were the shelves of pastries. Now those shelves were half empty. I can't believe this little gem has been here all these years and I never knew about it, one lady exclaimed as she wiped crumbs from her mouth. That Jillian knows what she's talking about. The man seated across the table from her nodded with his mouth full. Jillian smiled to herself. Was all this because of her review? She always enjoyed writing them, but never really followed up to see its impact firsthand. It was kind of awesome. Sir, I can only help one of you at a time, and right now I'm helping Doris. The sound of Serenity's voice got Julie's attention. But I was ahead of her, a man in a suit frowned at Serenity. The baker's face pinched with annoyance. For fuck's sake, Doris has been coming here since the day I opened. She has arthritis and a cane. You really want to argue over line cutting? The man's mouth pursed as he evaluated the elderly Doris, then inclined his head and stepped back. Another person entered, and Jillian glanced at her watch, wishing she had longer than half an hour for her lunch break. It looked like her best chance at talking to Serenity at all was to get in line. Jillian loved watching her work. Serenity shined her attention on each customer like they were the only person in the room. Her sincere smile and intense eyes had that effect, and Jillian found herself pushing away little stabs of jealousy. When at last that engaging smile turned on her, Jillian's mouth went dry. She forgot everything she had rehearsed in her head. Everything. Serenity's smile faltered, her eyes uncertain. Hello. Hi. Jillian felt suddenly shy and hyper-aware of the people waiting behind her. What can I get you? Serenity's tone was all business. Her eyes were shuttered and her smile tight-lipped. 10 minutes of your time? Your forgiveness? How about a date? The thoughts tumbled through her mind, but all she could manage was one of those your favorite. Serenity nodded and went about placing one in a small box. I'm sorry, Jillian finally said. I was researching and this is coming out all wrong. Too soon, Serenity shoved the box across the counter and quoted her a price. The finality of it struck Jillian, and all she could do was hand over the cash and get out of the way. She gave Serenity one last look, but the baker had already moved on to the next customer. Her lunch break was almost up. With a sigh, she clutched the box to her chest and left the bakery.
Chapter 11. Serenity. As Jillian slumped out the door, Serenity immediately regretted being so terse with her. She wasn't used to this many people in her bakery, and she wasn't sure what else to do with her. She knew the woman meant her apology, could see it in her big, expressive eyes, but it just wasn't the time. Plus, she needed a little more than just, I'm sorry. By closing time, Serenity was exhausted. If this pace kept up, she would have to hire help, which was definitely a good problem to have. She walked over to the glass door and flicked the open sign to closed. That's when she noticed the woman on the ground, propped against the big tree, head lolled to one side, fast asleep. Jillian. Serenity stepped outside and smiled despite herself. Jillian's mouth was slightly ajar, but she still managed a firm hold on the pastry box in her lap. It was so adorable, Serenity nearly forgot what she was angry about. She watched a moment longer, then finally cleared her throat. Jillian awoke with a start, fumbling the box in her hands. Blue eyes blinked and darted about until they finally landed on Serenity, who stood before her with hands on her hips. Her eyes widened. Huh, she said as she self-consciously wiped her mouth. I wasn't drooling, was I? I'm kind of a drooler sometimes. Serenity broke into a laugh and held out her hand. Jillian's tense brow eased as she allowed herself to be hauled to her feet. Now, standing face to face, Serenity waited, forcing her dancing insides to remain calm. The blonde blinked a few times. Her eyes slid to a man walking down the sidewalk. Serenity understood and beckoned her inside the bakery, locking the door behind them. When she turned around, she folded her arms and put on her best "this had better be good" face.
Chapter 12. Jillian. For the record, I'm not stalking you. Jillian giggled nervously but cringed at the strangled sound that came out. Serenity didn't budge or speak, just stood there with her arms crossed and head at a slight tilt, waiting. At least she wasn't yelling at her. That was a good sign, right? Jillian inhaled a long, deep breath, opened her mouth. Her eyes drifted to the door as she briefly considered fleeing like a criminal. No, she's listening to you. Start at the beginning. Jillian cleared her throat. I came back after my shift, but decided it was a bad idea to bother you again, so I decided to wait. I guess I fell asleep? That's not the beginning, she chided herself. She pressed on. So, after you left that comment on my blog, I got really curious. I mean, I was mad at first because, well, you kind of implied I was an idiot. Serenity's face softened a bit and she nodded. Encouraged, Jillian continued. I was all set to yell at you. Well, in the form of a comment rebuttal, she rubbed her nose. I don't think I could bring myself to actually yell at a complete stranger. One corner of Serenity's mouth quirked. Jillian dropped her gaze to her wringing hands. Anyway, I decided to come here myself, to find out if you were for real, or, a windbag. She peeked at the baker and found a small smile there. And what did you find? Serenity raised an eyebrow. All this. Jillian gestured to the walls and spun in a slow circle, stopping in front of a wrought iron gate mounted to one wall. She gave Serenity a sideways glance. "And you?" "Me, the windbag." Jillian shook her head. "Not at all. I mean, you do curse a lot and you speak what's on your mind in a very direct way, but, She returned her gaze to the ironwork. "It's weirdly charming." When no response came, Jillian peeked at her and found her mouth parted, eyebrows raised. The woman seemed to have no idea the effect she had on people. Jillian turned to face her. "Yes, you are charming, because even though you're brusque, there's this kind sincerity I don't see often, and it's..." She looked away. "It's kind of a turn-on." She felt the heat rush to her face and she rubbed her nose again. She wanted to sink into the floor right then, but if she didn't get through all this, she might never do it. "And that's why I lied. When you asked me my name, I panicked. I couldn't be that annoying blogger who said nice things about your rival. I wanted to be someone else, someone you might possibly like." Jillian swallowed hard and plopped into a nearby chair, cradling her head in her hands. "I'm so pathetic. I just wanted you to like me." She heard Serenity sit in the chair across from her. "The funny thing is, I do like you." Jillian looked up. "You do?" Her head bobbed. "I think, when it really matters, you are honest." Jillian's mouth dropped open. She continued talking. "Plus, you listen to my crap, and nobody likes listening to my crap." "I don't think it's crap." "See?" Serenity's lopsided smile nearly stopped Jillian's heart. "How can I not like you?" Jillian suddenly forgot how to breathe. So I'm forgiven?" Serenity reached across the table and took her hand. The look in her dark eyes was intense in their sincerity. More than forgiven. Jillian's heart raced at the contact and a giddiness galloped through her veins. Then her brow wrinkled. "What does that mean?" "It means," Serenity's grip tightened, "that I'd like to know you better." Jillian leaned forward, not quite believing the moment. "Yeah?" Serenity carefully lifted Jillian's hand to her lips, her eyes never breaking contact. She could feel Serenity's warm breath across her knuckles before those lips brushed across them. "Yeah, I really would." Jillian's brain forgot how to form words. "Just promise me one thing," Serenity said, as she continued holding Jillian's hand. Jillian's brows lifted in response. "Don't get mad if I slip and call you June." She made a hell of a first impression. Thank you for listening to The Baker and the Blogger by Zoe Blessing. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe so you can discover more.